Hi everyone!
Hi!
Welcome back to episode 8 of The Dip. This is our first recorded episode of the new school year. We had a new episode uploaded like 2 weeks ago, but this is the first one we're recording, so that's fun. I'm Ray.
I'm Tori.
And I'm Victoria.
And before we begin, I think this is actually Tori's first time appearing anywhere at all on The Dip, so if you want to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Hi, I'm Tori Ibarra. I'm a VFA musical theater major, and I act as the DEI, discussion and events in I'd say ideator or coordinator as I call it, but of OSBS now, and I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yay! Tori is our newly appointed council member. So woo!
Yes. Glad to have her on board. What are we talking about this week, guys?
Today we are talking about the generational gap.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say I want to kick us off.
Okay, so the generational gap is the differences of opinions and outlooks between one generation and another. So I think now we're mostly going to talk about how we as Generation Z relate to our parents who are more Gen X or millennial.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some key differences between Gen Z children and their Gen X or millennial parents that y'all can think of?
That's a great question. I would say more of societal, I don't know how to explain it. Does that make sense though?
In what way?
I'm talking about society as it is now. I think there are a lot of things now that are normalized and brought to attention than there were in for example, my parents' time. So as they were growing up, so it's two different viewpoints and I don't know, structures, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. And I think another big point of it too is because I think big ways that generations are separated is big historical events.
Yes.
So I think for Gen X millennials it was 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it was more towards COVID, the COVID era. Mm-hmm. So I think those two big events had impacts because with 9/11, there's definitely more sense of patriotism with it because, hit America close to home.
Yeah.
I think it had some political involvement because of the way Bush advocated for it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people grew up seeing that same side. Mm-hmm. Whereas with us, we saw COVID as this worldwide thing. You have to focus more on taking care of yourself and not being out so often. So I think just having those different events definitely made such a big separation for us.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Bouncing off of that, I think also during COVID, all the things that happened, you're good.
I thought it was my first
I have some nice questions on here.
No,
awesome.
You're good.
Of course
I forget about it all the time. I forget the name. But all the protests that were happening. That's a good way to say it. All the protests that were happening at the same time that were coming off. Does that make sense? Am I?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just not making any sense right now. I apologize to anyone who's saying that. I'm very nervous.
You're waking up.
You're good. You're good. And if anything,
I'll cut it out.
Yeah.
They won't see
Great.
this.
Nobody
perfect.
Nobody has to know.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, going off of the how COVID was such a big part of Generation Z's story. Something that I learned when researching this is that we are referred to as the loneliest generation.
Mm-hmm.
So why do y'all think that is?
I think it's because, we grew up with technology, and so social media was literally formed right before our eyes, and then especially with COVID, we had nothing to do except be on these devices and be by ourselves and be isolated from the world. So I think it definitely makes it harder to branch out to other people when you have it all right here, and it's like, oh well, like I can just reach out to them on the internet, like I can just text them or whatnot. It's definitely a different kind of vibe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like the way of communication
Yes.
has completely shifted
Mm-hmm.
from like our parents, who we were talking about went through 9/11 and then like had that big technology boom
Mm-hmm.
of like now everything is so much more regulated and
Yes.
everything is kind of found in the palm of your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything else to add to that?
I think part of it too is because, like, you know, in previous generations, their parents could say something like, this is how you grow up, and then they could still apply it. But the way of like technology advancing and, you know, everything being more regulated, everything spiked up. So a lot of things are different from how they were raised versus how we were raised.
Yes.
So like, I don't know if you had this situation, but like when you first went out to go like apply for jobs, your parents were like, you didn't get a job? Well, did you go to them and look the manager in the eye and say, hi, I want this job, and shake their hand? I mean,
That is
I did that to like 3 or 4 of them, and they still were like, just go online and apply, dude. What's wrong with you? Just go do what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then I tell that to my parents, and they're like, well, that's just stupid.
Yeah. Like
I
that
think-
should work.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things like that where it's like we have to do things differently from how they had to do it.
Yes.
But that's all that they knew. So the teaching sort of separation, it just makes it harder for us to do things. So we have to sort of teach ourselves.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think that sort of builds the sense of individualism, but also loneliness. And I think that's why we're the lonely generation.
Right, yeah, that's a very, very good way of putting it. Kind of going off of that is something that is noticed a lot in Gen Xers is that they're very, very self-reliant. I would say they're like self-reliant to a fault. I think, was it them or millennials that normalized like the grind?
I think it was millennials.
Millennials?
Yes, I want to say so.
I don't know. I think it was just sort of like an
Boomers.
in-between sort of thing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But somewhere, the grind got normalized.
Yeah.
And now we're all suffering from it. I think something that comes with that is that, you know, it makes the people that have that mindset ultra independent and they don't want to talk about their problems, which is what Gen Z is really, really doing.
Yes,
really talking
yeah.
about problems. So, then like, how do you think that creates a rift between like the Gen Z people and their like parents who don't want to talk about problems?
Speaking from like experience, it could be like little things, like if I hurt myself, my mom would be like, you'll be fine, just get up and you'll be fine if you just keep going. And then like later on when I started realizing that I had anxiety and I was like, I don't really know how like to deal with this, or I don't really know what this feeling is, and my mom was just kind of like, or my parents were like, oh, you're just overthinking it, like it'll be fine, it'll just go away. Like all you gotta do is think good thoughts and it'll go away. But now that there's been so much more like research and like studies into mental illness and whatnot, and sorry, give
No,
me
you're
that. Sorry, like what was the question again?
It was what creates a rift between people from our generation that want to talk about problems like mental health
Yeah.
and like our parents who have gotten used to being so self-reliant they don't want to talk about those problems.
Yeah, I think it's more like the independence thing that we were talking about earlier. It's a lot like, oh, well, if I just work on it myself, like, I'll get over it and it'll be fine. Or, yeah. I had something else to say. I'll breathe and it'll come back to me.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Right?
I don't know. Victoria, you got something? I think I
Well-
have something to say. It just needs to be unlocked first.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's just that that Gen Z is very, very much open to talking about a lot of these problems because they have an outlet on social media.
Yeah.
that our parents didn't really have.
Yes.
That they used to like wear cat ears and stuff for sure.
Right.
But now that we're getting more comfortable with sharing these kinds of things, there also like come implications with that. I think I'm leading on to a separate question entirely. But let's see.
I know what you mean though. Like for me, my parents, for like me, I guess, growing up for them, mental illness and things like that were viewed as like wrong, or there's something very wrong with you. And so now if they see that in their children, they're like, oh my God, something's really wrong with my kid, or things like that, if that makes sense. When really it's just like, this is normal for some people, and some people have it where, worse than others, and you just gotta, flow through it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Gen Z has like kind of normalized like the aspect of therapy, and like it's okay to get help. And a lot of times I've noticed that like older generations are way more hesitant to kind of fall in with that and be like, wait, yeah, I actually do need help.
Right.
Because a lot of things that I've seen are like Gen Z is kind of trying to undo a lot of generational trauma. But I feel like that also is a huge other thing.
Yes, that's like another.
Yeah.
I feel if we want to segue, we can segue.
Okay. So yeah, Gen Z values more like diversity, and we have more prominent mental health challenges that we speak about. But like, is it actually new stuff? Like, are people just coming out and saying, oh, I have anxiety, or I have depression, or is it something that has been like hidden by former generations?
Yes.
You think so? Wow.
I do believe so. Just because, well, it's a lot to do with, like, again, as I was saying earlier, like, things like that were, like you said, hidden. So the awareness of it was, like, very minimal. And, like, I mean, as an example, Princess Diana with the royal family, and how they were just hiding the fact that, she had an eating disorder and that she was anxious and depressed, because they were like, there can be nothing wrong with this family. And again, the thought that those feelings and those things where people are struggling and they need help, like thinking that if we just hide it, like it doesn't exist, And I feel like a lot of the older generation has done a lot of that. If that makes sense.
I agree, but I also think part of it is that, like, we're discovering things now. Like, I think the development of, like, how to deal with mental health is the same thing as, like, the development of, like, medicine and stuff.
Yes.
Because, like, in the past, people have been like, you have some sort of disease that's coming up through your arm, let's chop your arm off. But then they started discovering medicine, and they were like, well, maybe not chop your arm off. There might be better solutions than that.
Right.
That's a really good way of putting it, actually.
Yeah, really good.
I never thought about it like that.
So I think people are just starting to discover that now, because we have the technology and everything that we need to figure that stuff out. And we know that it's like brain issues and stuff that you're born with, things like that. So now that it's here, some of the older generations might just be like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing.
Right.
So
because they couldn't like pinpoint what it was, because they didn't, there wasn't anything about it. That makes, that's a really good analogy, right? Really good. Like, I was like, wow, that's really good.
Yeah. So one thing that I also want to talk about is, like, kind of going off of that, is the stereotype of Gen Z that we're like soft, because of how much we talk about our issues.
Yeah.
And even like with organizations like this, you can like see how people are like, well, why is that a big deal?
Right.
Or like, this was fine before, so why do we need it? Whatever. But this article from UVA Health is like, it's this guy kind of explaining why he feels like his kids are like soft, growing up to be soft. So like parents' frustrations with Gen Z kids, and it says that Gen Z actually wants to hold on to their youth. So, and that means that it's been said that we are socially and behaviorally developing more slowly. So they're less likely to want to hit milestones, and it says that fewer teens are getting part-time jobs, having sex, drinking alcohol, and learning to drive.
Some of those things are like, oh, and some of those things are like, well, why do you need that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so like, why do you think Gen Z wants to hold on to their youth more than generations have in the past?
I think it's because we can afford to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like back in the day, a lot of people needed to get jobs really quickly because we didn't have the developments to get stuff done. Like, you know, like we don't need as many car manufacturers now because now we have like robots and stuff to build them. But back then they were like, we need as many 15, 16-year-olds as we can in these sweatshops, like building cars now. But I think now we can afford to sit back and let other people do stuff, and you can grow up and learn things and enjoy your childhood.
Right.
Yes, that's a great point. That's a great point. Sorry, I was like, wow. No, yeah, I feel like a lot of kids are forced to grow up so fast, and it's like we do have a really long time to cherish what we have in our childhoods, and why not do that? Why not live in that moment? Great point, right? Sorry, I was like, wow.
Yeah, and with the rise of the use of technology,
Yes.
more Gen Z kids are seeing kind of how miserable the older generations actually are, in my opinion.
No, I agree.
So they want to, like, a lot, like before, it was like, oh, I can't wait to grow up, right? You don't see many Gen Z people saying that, do you?
Yes.
Like, I think that Gen Z, oh my gosh, like millennials and like Gen X really, really dive into that nostalgia because they didn't really get to experience a lot of that. It was more ingrained in them that they needed to contribute to society than enjoy their lives.
Yeah.
So, so with Gen Z kind of flipping that, it's much easier to see why the older generations would consider us like lazy or soft.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that people really need to take into consideration when they're like, oh, why don't you like get your butt up and do something? I'm enjoying my life.
I think there's also a certain like, not like uneasiness, but cautiousness about it. Like, oh my gosh. Like, I remember the first time I got a job, I was like, oh my God, I have a job now. And then, like, when I was applying to colleges, oh my gosh, when did I grow up and, like when did I become old enough to apply to college? Like, I never even thought about this when I was younger. And it's a great point.
Yeah, so this article goes on to say, a slow life develop... Oh, hold on. So why is this? A shift in demographics and parenting. We are different and the way we parent is different, so our kids are different. It says, a slow life development is more common when families have fewer children and more time to cultivate each child's growth and development. So that's kind of what we're seeing now, is people are having less children than they have, like, than the previous generations have had. So there is more time for, like, individual, like, cultivation of their children. So it's not like they're just looking at their parents and they're just like grinding all the time, like on the move, and so they're not modeling themselves after their parents' actions. I'm sorry. You said grinding and also making children, and I just thought. Sorry. I'm sorry. They're not. They're not. What's the better way to put that? No, I get what you're saying. It was just my dumb little brain. Yeah. So they're not like particularly looking toward their parents' like actions and like work ethic as a model of how they need to be. They're more like, parents are more focused on the ideologies that they instill in their children growing up.
Yeah.
I think is what I'm trying to say. I'm not exactly sure. But it says families now have 2 children on average. We structure opportunities for them and to prepare them for college. Organized sports are starting earlier, and so it makes sense that our children are not hitting the milestones at the same pace. Yeah, so women had, on average, 4 kids in earlier generations. So they had a lot less time to devote to each child's development,
Right.
and kids were mostly on their own, so they moved faster through those milestones that we were
Yes.
talking about.
Yes. I know, personal, my mom and my dad come from huge families. My mom comes from a family of seven kids, and my dad comes from 10.
Yeah.
So it was a
My
lot
gosh.
like, I know, yes, definitely a lot of crazy. And they, like, most of the time, because there were new children, like, every other, like, year, they all had to, like, kind of raise themselves and kind of navigate themselves through their own experiences and, like, helping their younger siblings who weren't, like, or older siblings who weren't getting as much attention, if that makes
For sure, yeah. And we see this all the time, too. I feel like most people's parents or grandparents had really big families.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So, so slower maturation has positives, like a lower teen pregnancy rate, which, like, we were talking about how kids are not having as much sex as they were before. And it says we tell our teens to slow down, and they are. So, like, they're, yeah, again. Oof.
Mind blown.
But I just thought that was really interesting about the way that we are not really wanting to grow up. Kind of also because of how crazy the world is right now. Y'all have anything to add about any of that?
That is a cool article. What was the title of the article
Yeah,
again?
what was it?
Just so I know for my sake.
Yep, it's called Is This Normal? My Teens Gen Z Characteristics and Slow Adolescent Development by UVA Health.
Wonderful title there.
Yeah, I was was researching and I saw the article, I was like, okay, sure.
All right.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's really cool. Are there any other differences that y'all have noticed, like, with, like, y'all's parents' generation and with our generation?
I think, like, an expectation of living is also different because, like, I was talking about this with some of my coworkers today. Do y'all's parents love putting up, like, multiple Christmas trees, or is that, like, just me?
I mean, we have 2.
Okay.
I have 1.
Because, like, my family has, like, 4, and then we have, like, a 5th, like, little ceramic one.
Aww.
Wow.
And I think part of that is because, like, older generations like millennials and Gen Z enjoy having, like, a very decorative and, like, a big house, because they want to be able to, like, invite people over and be like, hey guys, check out how wonderful my house is, come stay for a while, come enjoy hanging out with me. But I think some of our more modern generations are kind of like, I don't care how we hang out as long as we just hang out. Like, we could just play video games or, like, talk on the phone for a few hours, and that's considered, like, a hangout session or something.
Right.
And especially with, like, Zoom coming up because of, like, the COVID era, I think it just made the idea of, like, having to live more lavishly not as big of a deal. Because nowadays people are kind of just more understanding of, like, if you just want to go to a McDonald's for, like, an hour or 2 and just, like, buy 1 Big Mac and then talk for the rest of the time, that's considered hanging out. Whereas back in the day, they were like, we need to go to the mall, we need to go to this place, we should go get food, we should go back to my house and hang out for fun, we should spend the whole day together and stuff like that. I don't know. I feel like that's just a personal thing that I noticed. I think older generations like living more lavishly, but we're more just, like, living.
I like that you pointed that out because a lot of research supports that millennials especially are more concerned with, like, appearances and, like, they're more loyal to brands that were popular when, like, they were growing up than Gen Z is. So that's very interesting. I don't know where exactly I got that information, but I did write it down. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's kind of crazy. Because yeah, now that we have more access to just like hey, blah blah blah, texting, whatever, we don't really feel the need to be as extra.
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you think it's like damaging for Gen Z to be considered soft?
I think in a sense, yes, it is, because I think there is so much strength and vulnerability and a lot of courage to stand up and say, hey, this is what's going on with me, and I need to get help. And I feel like there is just, again, like I said, so much strength with that. And can you say the question one more time?
Yeah. Like, what are some better ways that we can communicate with our parents, and that our parents can communicate with us, so we're not so divided?
I think,
That is a good question.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any ideas?
I was
Do you
gonna-
want to start leading the way?
It's very, I mean, the one idea I kind of have is very, very broad, and it's just more empathy towards each other.
That's what I was trying to tie it into, but then I totally blanked.
No,
yes,
you totally.
that's exactly what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of how much the world has changed,
Yes.
it's only natural that
Yeah.
we're going to have those like discrepancies and everything. But it is very difficult to relate, for one,
Yeah.
to older generations
Mhm.
and our parents who have much different ideologies.
Yeah. I think
so-
also a willingness to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think it means a lot it could mean so much to a kid. That they're
Mhm.
you're hey, this is really happening with me right now. And your parents oh, okay, well, I don't really know much about that. Let me learn more about it. That would, do loads, help
Nice.
loads.
So if parents wouldn't mitigate or ignore an
Yes,
issue,
not neglect any of the
yeah.
issues, instead being okay, and also working together to educate themselves in a way.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. And so then how in turn can we be more understanding towards our parents?
Yeah.
Do you think maybe a thought that I always have is I want to talk about this issue, but they're so set in their opinions
Mm-hmm.
that it's not going to be received well.
I think just having the confidence to do it regardless,
Yes.
which is very difficult to do, even if it is to
100%.
your parents.
Right.
I know I would have a really hard time opening up my views to my parents sometimes, but I think it's an important thing to do regardless. Because I think especially now, the phrase walking a mile in my shoes is a lot hard. It's a lot harder to walk a mile in your parents' shoes and for them to walk a mile in our shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's just such a larger gap of misunderstanding
Mhm.
and difference between us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just trying to rip the Band-Aid off and say, I know there's differences, but this is what I think. I think that's just going to be important, because there's not going to be as much similarity, but if we don't try something, I don't think we're going to be able to bridge that gap.
I would have to agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Huh.
And also with that, you never know what that could mean to them. Hearing that side, it could be oh, I've never thought about it like that before, or I never realized this about this, and it can be somewhat educational for them, even if they don't change how they are thinking about a certain situation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So another quote. I've decided I'm not done with this article yet. The psychologist that was talking to this parent that was really frustrated with his kids, She said, adolescent development is a challenging time of trying to fit in and also stand out. That kids feel overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the information being thrown at them is not at all surprising, because we have so much information and access to information just like coming at us all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, cancel culture is real because people think it's real, and then that becomes an issue.
Right.
Oh.
Cancel culture is a whole
We should
different
talk about
conversation.
cancel culture.
I know, I was about to say, I
Episode
will
98
add it to the,
Yeah.
I will add it to the Google Drive.
Google Drive.
Yeah,
That way,
Yeah. Ooh.
but I feel like that could be a follow-up thing because like nowadays it's both easier and harder to fit in, because like if you don't fit in, you could easily get canceled and then everybody hates you.
Right.
But also if you fit in too much, no one's really going to care or recognize you, and then you can't really do anything.
Right.
And then you're kind of up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. I don't know. I think just with the development of social media and whatnot, it's very hard to like keep a good status in life, because especially back then, without like social media, a lot of who you are was just presented through word of mouth.
Right.
So somebody from far away couldn't recognize you or something. But especially now, like you could post something and then somebody in a different state could see you and then immediately base an opinion off of you just off of like one little thing.
Right. And I think we see that a lot in like influencers and celebrities. And this goes into cancel culture.
Yeah.
But like if there is something that let's say they make a mistake, we're just so quick to be like, oh well, they made that mistake, let's just not support them ever again, instead of like being lenient with like people, because like they're humans too. You know.
Yeah, I think that definitely contributes to the like diagnoses of anxiety, especially amongst Gen Z, because we don't want to make those kind of mistakes, and we're
Right.
afraid about what people think of us. I
Right.
think more than previous generations because of social media.
Yes,
because we
the-
want to be liked.
Yes.
And now it's on such a broader scope than it has been in the past.
Yes. And like it's so easy for any, like you were saying, from somebody from a different state to see a photo of somebody and be like, well, I think your socks don't match, or some like, of course there's like extreme situations.
Yeah.
It's definitely not your socks don't match, but you know, you get what I'm putting
Yeah.
down.
People can still make an impression off you right
Right.
away, even if they don't even know you. They'll just see like one picture of you and be like, I don't like you.
Yeah, or like you encounter them like once and you're like, the vibe was off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because
Yes.
we're so quick to judge people.
Yes, 100%. I think. Oh.
We are. Yikes. Maybe we shouldn't be so judgmental.
Generational curse. We're going to talk about generational curses and traumas now. A generational curse is defined as a habit or behavior that has been passed from one generation to the next. So, like, parents strive to make sure that the life they led will help their children live a better life, if that makes
Okay.
sense. And then, do we have generational trauma? I mean, I think it's pretty similar. I have an article pulled up. One second.
Very nice.
Y'all came prepared. Also, fair warning, I kind of slept in last minute, so
That's okay.
shouts out to Sinai. She's not feeling good right now,
We
so
love you, Sinai.
thoughts some prayers.
We love you. So generational trauma is trauma that extends from one generation to the next. So like traumatic event like 9/11, and then like with ethnic groups, cultural, familial distress, economic distress. Generational trauma is known as, or refers to the passing down of traumatic experiences or stressors from one generation to another. So it's like witnessing acts of violence or residing in environments where the threat of violence is very present, or it can include like anxiety, depression, PTSD. The first question that she asked about it, sorry, that was like so a lot. The first question that Sinai asked about it, again, love you, Sinai, wishing you the best. She asked, hold on. Do you believe in generational traumas or generational curses?
I mean, there are definitely things that that parents have instilled in their brains so much that they kind of raise the child with it, and now that we're kind of seeing, like, hey, maybe this isn't the healthiest thing, we kind of have to try to fix that. So I think that kind of does entail, like, generational traumas. I think especially with immigrant families.
Yes.
They have worked so hard to get here that it's like you are expected to contribute to that and follow a very specific life that your parents have set out for you. So I think I see that more in immigrant families. But are there any other, like, examples of that y'all can think of?
I'll be honest, I can't really think of too many, like, generational curses or stuff like that. Mostly because I think with us being the lonely generation, shouts out, I think we started seeing, like, the bad things that was passed from generation to generation and started, like, being, you know, having more individual thoughts and being like, this may not be okay.
Right.
Like, this may not count as a generational thing, but Halloween was a few days ago, and we did do an OSBS trunk or treat. We helped out with the trunk or treat thing. Did y'all notice if any of the kids said trick or treat? Because I don't
think they did.
I don't know if many of them did. And I think the point that I'm trying to make with that is, like, you know, things that have been passed down to generation, such as holiday traditions.
Yes.
Those have slowly started dying away because with things like Halloween, people have started thinking maybe going to door to strangers' houses and asking for candy may not be the best thing.
Right.
You know, whether it be like the sake of convenience, you know, like making trunk or treats, or whether it be for safety, you know, not having your kids go kind of unsupervised door to door, like 10 blocks down. I think the newer generations have started being like, maybe the stuff we've done in the past hasn't been the best thing, so let's stop that, you know? So I think we're starting to, like, get away from generational curses. There's probably some that we still keep and will probably maintain, but not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, which, bouncing off of, like, the end of what you said about, like, breaking away from those things, the next question is, why does this generation seem kind of, like, responsible for, like, breaking generational curses, do you think?
I think it's because, like we talked about, we have access to like all these other people's stories about, like, dealing with that kind of thing, and we're more aware of it now, so it's easier to identify.
What I had written down was pretty much the same thing, a lot more like education and exposure to things, and being exposed to those kind of things and recognizing them brings awareness to them, like kind of what Ray was saying, like, hey, like, what we did before, like, that actually was, like, not cool, and that was actually really hurtful, and we should not do that. I had, like, an example, but I'm not sure if, like, I don't know if we want to share it. I'm not sure.
I think you can if you want.
Well, I was going to say it was, like, especially growing up for me as a kid, like, the normalization of the R slur.
Oh, yeah.
That was my biggest, like, thing. Is, like, we used to say it, and, I thought it was just a normal word. Like, nobody knew what it meant. And then growing up and, like, being exposed to, like, you know, which kind of slurs are, what slurs are and how they're hurtful to certain communities, like, seeing that and being like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to say that again because that was horrible. And it can be really hurtful, especially if, you know, if you were in front of somebody in that certain community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I heard that word all the time growing up.
And, like, the older generation, like, still uses it because I think for them it was so, again, normalized, so that they don't see anything wrong with it or how it can be hurtful.
Yeah.
What do you think some generational gaps will be for like the generations ahead of us?
I was kind of thinking like along those same lines, like when we were talking about like, is it a question of convenience or trust, like issues between people now? Do y'all think that we will continue to have more and more distrust, like, of other people in the future, or would there be a way to kind of unify each other, I guess?
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's definitely something to ponder on.
Yeah, because I feel like no one really fully trusts a lot anymore. I mean, it's
Yes.
that was basically just like thought of when we were talking about the trick or treat stuff.
Yeah.
So how will that look in the future? How can we kind of create an environment that's not promoting distrust, if y'all know what I mean? I think that's kind of a convoluted question.
Yeah. I think that would have us dive into like politics and like the development of technology and stuff. Because I think politics is going to be a big thing about like the idea of trust going into the future. Because I mean, you see like how things like the presidential race and like the fight between like Democrats and Republicans and even like infighting between those two parties is, you know, building more distrust between people. Because especially nowadays, people will not like you just because of your political party. You know, I mean, I wasn't alive back in the 1900s, but I don't think it, and I mean, I don't have any sources to prove myself either. I don't think it was as bad as it is now.
No,
I mean,
it's definitely gotten worse.
Yeah, I mean, you know, people could disagree about it, but I think back then you could like argue about it for a little bit, but then like the next day you'll wake up and move on. But I think nowadays, like, if a Democrat told themselves they were Democrat to a Republican or vice versa, they just straight up may excommunicate you for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So I think just the way the political world is going to advance in the future, I think that's going to play like the biggest factor in how we trust ourselves moving on.
Right. I think something we need to do is bring back like being able to agree to disagree.
Yes, that's a great point. And also like being, if you have if you disagree with someone, like respect that they are able to believe whatever they choose to believe and move on and say thank you, good night. I still respect you as a person, instead of like excommunicating and like, I mean, like possibility to hear each other out too.
Right.
To hear like how and why that they think that way on both sides, and then again agree to disagree. I think it's like, interesting.
I think it's crazy how much like people want to be involved in other people's opinions.
Yes.
Like if they hear something that they disagree with, automatically they're like, you are like on the defensive of like, or on the offensive, being like, well, this is why you should believe like this is wrong.
Right.
So how is it possible for Gen Z to kind of go back to that idea of respecting people's decisions and just kind of letting it be?
Right. I think that we definitely can do that. I mean, of course, conversations are welcome to be had, but also like another thing is not trying to force it on somebody, because in the end, like there's only so much like you can say or do, and it may just like completely blow over someone's head, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You know.
that does make sense.
Yeah,
So
I feel like that's a good answer.
Yeah.
So we should probably talk about more positive.
Yeah, positive.
Yeah.
Like in the future, what do y'all think can happen like with future generations in terms of maybe like development of like mental health assistance or like access to needs.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like, y'all think that would be improved in the future?
I think so. I think a lot more people are going to like seek help now and learn how to kind of navigate their way with like mental illness or something else. And like for me, therapy has been a huge help. I think it's great. I think everybody should have it. Like it's really, it teaches you a lot about yourself and like getting to know yourself. And I think that can be really important for future generations to come.
Yeah, so in that sense, like Gen Z is kind of paving the way for future generations
Yes.
to be able to get the help that they need.
Yes.
Before it before it causes more generational trauma.
Right. Right. And kind of like preventing that.
I also think the idea of like speaking up and speaking out for like
Yes.
your own personal feelings is a bigger
Yes.
thing. And I think that's thanks to things like social media.
Yes.
I think movies and stuff have definitely helped with that because now people are making more like social commentary pieces. So I think more people are seeing things that are like, these people have issues, these people have certain problems, and I could possibly relate to that. And rather than just keeping it to myself, I could act like they're acting and speak out about it.
Yeah, like to be an ally and to support others who are in need or who are being like oppressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a very bright aspect of the
Yes.
future that's possible thanks to Gen Z's kind of annoying persistence. Yeah, I think in my research as well, there has been some negative aspect to the whole like getting a whole bunch of information at once. Like a lot of what I saw was that like my children are saying that they have PTSD from the way that I talked to them, and the child is like 10 or something, and they're kind of like seeing a lot of this content. So I guess like it's overall a good thing that these issues are being made aware of. Like we're aware of these issues more than we were, but maybe we could talk a little bit about how it could be detrimental to people's actual growth. Like a lot of people are self-diagnosing at a very, very young age now, because of how much of that kind of content they see.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so I don't know what exact question could be raised with that, but do y'all have anything to say about that negative aspect, or like what can we do to not encourage that, I guess?
That's a good point. I think with the way that media is trending and how easily accessible media like that is, like you hear the idea of like iPad babies, but that's like genuinely rubbing off on like the youngins of our world. Like they can just easily look up something if they wanted to.
Right, and like
Tell
even
themselves.
accidentally too. I remember I didn't get an iPad until I was like at least 9, 10. And like other than that, there was no electronics, or either that or I had a BlackBerry phone. I could only text and play that like little lumberjack game where you cut the wood off the tree. Like that was it. And now it's like, even then there was like so much to explore and find out.
Right.
And it could be by mistake, and you just never know. And then you figure out about something and you're like, what's this? Mom, what's this? And then they're like, what?
Yeah, I remember I was one of the last of my friends to get a phone, and I got a phone like in junior high school. It was the first like phone I had, and I spent so much time on it. Like I I was like, oh, now I finally have one. Now let's spend like 2 hours on it at night.
Right.
It's probably more than 2 hours. But like, ooh, but now that people are, like the younger side of our generation are getting access to that kind of technology from a very early age. What
can we do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, at least from what I've seen, I think like millennials and Gen Xers, like our generations before us, have done a pretty good job in keeping us in check, you know, raising us right. You know, I mean, some of their ideologies might be old, of like, you know, if you're hurt, rub some dirt on it and like walk it off or something. But I think there's like a universal truth to that of like, you still have to grow up. You can't just teach yourself to do things, especially at a young age. The older generation has gone through a lot more than you have, regardless of what you try and teach yourself on your phone or your iPad or something. So, you know, as hard as it can be, and as much of a generational divide as there is, I think the younger generation still needs to listen and look up to them, but they still need to have their own individual taste. It's such a weird fine line of like, do this but also this.
Right. Like, it's very important to not lose sight of the fact that we still need to respect the people that came before us.
100%.
And a lot of like things that that Gen Z is doing now is kind of rebelling against them, and it's viewed in a very negative light.
Yes.
But yeah, we just need to like establish that we respect them, but we have different ideas of how things could happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think there's been stuff like that in the past. I mean, you hear things about like, oh, when I was your age, I was such a rebellious teenager, I would go out and party all the time, stuff like that. So, you know, younger generations have always wanted to become their own person and do things their own way, see things their own way. But I think just with like the generational gap and like, you know, all these advancements we're having and how different like the millennial is from a Gen Xer and a Gen Xer from a Gen Zer and stuff like that, it's getting harder for people to still rebel, but those older generations to be like, whoa, come back here, you know, hold them back. So I don't really know if there's like a solution or if there's anything that I think is like the solution.
I don't think there is a solid
I don't think
solution.
so either. I think it's like Ray was saying, a very fine line, like between them both.
It's definitely more of a principle of like maintaining respect. Yeah, so that's kind of crazy because this is just like an ongoing thing. There's really not a set way to deal with any of this.
Yeah.
But it is good to talk about it.
Yeah. This is one of the next question that really struck me. Do you guys feel like, let me check it to see if I'm saying it
Figure out the
correctly.
wording.
Do you feel closer or farther from your parents as you age, knowing that they come from a different generation as you and maybe have different like beliefs?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. I don't know really. I think as I grow up and like mature or whatever, I'm more able to see why they think the way that they do.
Yes.
But I don't have the same mindset that they do.
That's actually what I wrote down. I said like I do love my parents, but there are some things like where like, especially like me being on my own and being experiencing a lot of individuality, like there are a lot of things that I personally wouldn't like be like, oh yeah, that's that, you know what I mean? And let me recollect myself. Yeah, I think I'm very close to my parents, like relationally, but not generationally. I think there's a lot of like, we definitely are separate on a lot of things, but it doesn't affect how I love them. if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, good answer.
And I also think just like growing up and aging, you're able to
Yeah.
you're able to understand where they were coming from too.
Yes.
Because you might have thought something that they said when you were like 10 years old was like, that's stupid and they're stupid.
Right.
But now I'm 20 and I think back on it and I'm like, that was stupid. Why did I do that? But, having our own ideologies and mindsets on things, we can understand and relate to our
Yeah.
parents. We just may not see everything the same way.
Yeah.
So you're closer because you can understand them,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also kind of farther because you're becoming your own person and you're able to become more of your own person,
Mm-hmm.
especially because you're not living under their roof anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
especially
Mhm.
enhanced in college.
Yeah,
Yes.
once you get to college and stuff, there definitely is a farther diversion from
Mhm.
your parents, but I also think you feel closer to them because you can understand and relate to them.
Mhm. And you're more grateful for the
Oh,
sacrifices that they've made for you.
100%, and all that they've taught you and how they've raised you.
Yeah.
But I mean, we could start slowly wrapping up.
That's what, because I think that's a good kind
Yeah.
of wrapping up
Also,
point.
I don't know if you guys want to answer this, but do you guys think that there's you talked about there's generational divide, but do you think there's a divide in our generation, like Gen Z itself?
Ooh,
That's a good question.
like intergenerational divide.
Exactly.
We didn't even get into that.
We
did
did
we?
not.
Because there was a question that I don't remember what it was asked, and then you kind of got into it a little bit, and I was like, wait.
Okay, Edgar.
Okay,
Mr.
talk about
Advocate.
So
Our honorary fourth member of this podcast.
Yeah,
is
it's Edgar.
no, we can cut that
We're
out if
breaking
someone
the
asks
fourth
us the
wall.
question.
No, I think it's better if we keep it.
I think, at least
Yeah.
you asking the question and we're just reacting to it.
Yeah.
Let's answer Edgar Camarina's question. What do you
Bonus
think?
round.
Yeah, bonus round.
Bonus.
What kind of intergenerational divide do you think we have?
I think now, since to me, the thing that stands out the most is left versus right wing.
Yes, I was just about to say. I was gonna say political politics. Yeah.
And I think that is the first thing that comes to mind because it's what we see on campus mostly, especially with last year what all happened. Yay! But there was there's the Youth Conservative Association that's here, and then there's people that are obviously very left wing here, mostly in the fine arts. But yeah, I feel like it's mostly that
Yes,
that
I would
I
say
can
so too.
think of.
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have to agree. I think because another thing, being exposed to so many things and everyone educating themselves, it just depends on what you decide to take in and what you decide to believe and practice, and that's what will kind of separate.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that a lot in the politics kind of area, and that can also come from generations before, so your parents or your grandparents and how they believe.
Mm-hmm. So was this an issue that is especially seen by Gen Z, or is this just an overall thing? Because politics is pretty much always been politics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's
I
just
think-
overall.
I think it's with how every generation's been.
Yeah.
Because I think that'll always be a thing of intergenerational
For sure.
divide.
Yeah.
It was in the past, is now will be until we decide how to fix politics forever.
Right.
Oh god, that is another.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
it.
I think we just all have different ways of how it divides us.
Right.
I think another thing that divides generations is how we view the development of the world. Because especially nowadays, things like technology and the development of our world is growing exponentially. It just goes up like crazy. And this kind of leads me into a question that I wanted to ask of what kind of generational divides do you think we'll have for future generations?
Mm-hmm.
Of how will we be different from how our children will be growing up? I think a big factor is going to be AI,
Yes.
Oh.
because I mean the difference between millennial and Gen Z with technology was already huge.
Yeah.
But now we're using technology to develop AI, and that's already growing an insane amount. And we already see like people thinking it's a really good thing versus it's ruining humanity.
Right.
You know, there's this big back and forth. And that's causing intergenerational divide of people being like, we should probably slow down on AI versus we should keep going because it could do so much more for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'll just continue being a problem as like the next generation comes around.
For sure, yeah, because that's what we saw with the Gen X and like Gen Z of how much that caused a difference. That's gonna be very interesting to see.
Mm-hmm.
I think. I don't. Ooh, that's kind of scary to think about.
Yes.
Actually.
Because I mean, we did get a little hint of it with like, it was part of like the writer's strike and the actor's strike of like using AI to write movies and stuff like that.
But I also, well, that's a different
Yeah.
thing. That's
No,
a
it's
different.
okay.
I was about to be like, ah.
And see, that's the thing. Like,
I think, yeah.
people have different thoughts, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it caused like divides between, you know, should we use AI to help make movies? Should we not use AI at all? Should we have AI completely make their own movies and stuff like that?
Interesting.
And I think as AI develops more and more, we'll still have issues of like, when should we use it? What should we use it for? How much of it should we use? Should we continue developing it at all? It's a big topic, and I feel like it could also be its own episode.
Probably.
We're coming with so many
Yeah.
things. Cancel
Oh,
culture,
let's
AI.
just put this on the.
We could cancel so many things.
Yeah, because this all
I'm
plays
actually gonna-
into generational divides.
Mm-hmm.
What was our first one here? Cancel
Cancel
culture.
culture.
I'm gonna put this in the Google
Yeah.
Drive, and then the AI.
Yeah.
Because especially since we're like,
Like
a-
the strike.
yeah,
It's great. Yeah, strikes.
and also because we're like a theater department.
Yes,
that
and how it affects
developed
us.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we think it's going to affect
Yeah.
us?
Mm-hmm. I think there's gonna have to be a lot of discretion about like where or where not to use
Yes,
AI.
when it's appropriate to
Mhm.
use it.
Yeah, and I think we could start like doing that with like our generation
Mhm.
should start doing that. But that I don't even know. Like
Yeah.
I don't think anyone
Crazy.
can.
Do we
really
want to
know.
try
think
and
about.
swerve back on? Because I did ask the question of like, what do we think is going to be possible generational dividing gap things for future
future.
generations?
Yeah.
Because I did that.
Mm-hmm. We did talk about earlier how we think that access to like mental health resources will be a lot better for future generations, but will they utilize that?
Yes, that's
Like, yeah, is this generation more so like paving the way, or are we never mind, that was gonna be too convoluted of a question. I should not ask that. But I don't know where I was going with that actually, because
It's okay.
I had a question and it was probably not very good.
It's all right. I think another thing that might affect our future generations, and also something that's going to affect our generation. I don't know why I didn't bring it up or anything. The state of the economy.
Oh, for sure.
yes.
I think we're
oh my
like-
God, such a great
I
thing
think
to
we're
talk
genuinely
about.
one of the first generations that's set up to like not do as well as the people before us.
Yes, bouncing off of that, I read an article about how like this generation and previous ones, like kind of similar to it, are struggling to find like homes and places to live or keep a stable amount of income, especially with like tax stuff and whatnot. Great. So,
We're going another 30
we're
minutes.
going to be here all night.
Because there's also, I don't know if y'all know this like TikTok page. They're called Good Morning Bad News. It's basically like minute long segments of them
Sorry.
talking about like basically what's on the news.
Right.
And one of the big things that they like continuously bring up is like the state of the economy and how like this current generation is like almost doomed to fail because of how it's set up.
And we've
Like-
already had to be like so much more like skeptical about what
Yes.
we buy and how we like
Mhm.
how we are consumers.
Yes.
Because like I also read a lot of stuff about how Gen Z is a lot more like cautious with like how they spend money, and they really like research
Mhm.
like the best options, but we're still failing.
Mm-hmm.
We're still in so much debt.
Yes.
And on top of that, like older generations had such a better opportunity. Like
Mhm.
a personal example, my mom was like a waitress for like all of her time in college.
Mm-hmm.
And she has so many stories about like working at like the diner that she was at.
Right.
And she told me that she made $10 an hour plus like tips.
Yes.
I make $9 an hour plus 1% commission. So her job adjusted for inflation is so much more than what I make
Yeah.
now. And I still pay like part of my rent. I still have like all these like obligations
Right.
and expectations that I'm supposed to keep up with the job. And
Taxes.
then, yeah, and on top of that, I'm
And
supposed to
full-time
keep up
student.
with like
Right.
school and all that
Yeah.
stuff, which is probably just as hard, if not harder, than what she was doing,
Mhm.
especially with like how education has developed.
Yes.
So things like the minimum wage line.
Yes, I was just about to say.
Yeah.
You read my mind.
There-
Sorry.
There are so many things that were like set up to fail on,
Yeah.
100%.
and yet the older generation
Yeah.
is like, didn't you like go into the job and like shake their hand and just look them in the eye and ask for a job?
Right.
It's not that easy anymore, and it's
Yeah.
not that easy to live, and it's not that
Right,
easy to just
100%.
make money.
Right. Now
Oh
you're
my
like
gosh.
looking at each job that you're going into, like, by the way, $9 an hour is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, that's
Tell me
totally
about it.
crazy.
Like her as a tutor.
I'm just saying, it was like, that's crazy. Like, going into each job, especially for me when I've been job hunting, it's been like, how much do they pay an hour? And how much do I want, like, minimum?
And am I
maximum?
going to be
Am-
able to
am I
Yeah.
live
going to-
comfortably?
Yes,
with that
100%.
wage?
The
And the answer is
hours-
no.
the hours and the time and effort put into it, it's just freaking crazy. It's nuts.
And on top of that, with like the development of technology, less and less jobs are becoming available.
Yes, because
Like-
of AI and stuff.
Yeah, because I work in retail.
Right.
So Amazon
Is
is kicking our butts.
Right.
Like literally there was a meeting that I had to go to today and they were saying like all of our numbers were down and they were saying ways to improve it and all of us were just like, we're literally doing all of that. The issue isn't us. It's that like the company is dying and we also live in a part of the state and a part of the country where we're below the poverty line.
Right,
And why do you think that is? Because
Right.
the economy is kind of
right.
Yeah, and that's the same exact thing is happening with tutoring services.
Right.
Because there's now like BrainFuse and ChatGPT
Right.
that can kind of like help with that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But so we have also been seeing a lot less visits to tutoring resources on campus. Like the
Really?
numbers have pretty much plummeted
Wow.
since the development of those things. So, yeah, we're pretty much screwed.
Yeah, we're screwed, guys.
Yeah.
No, bouncing off what you were saying with Amazon, Amazon is becoming this huge corporation, and you can basically get anything, anywhere, on Amazon.
Yeah.
Like you can buy like a lawnmower. You can buy anything. You could buy like a new AC system on there. I'm sure. Maybe I'm lying. Maybe I'm crazy. But don't fact check me on it, okay? But like you can basically buy like you can see it with clothes. And then a lot more stores have been going out of business, like at malls and whatnot, because nobody goes anymore.
Mhm.
When I went to the mall just the other day, there was nobody there. And it was a Friday. And I was like, wow, how interesting.
Yeah.
Because now also a lot of these brands don't have to keep putting in stores if they can just do it online.
Yeah.
And you could just have it shipped to you.
Very true. So then is the job market going to be a very big change for future generations?
I I think so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
like different kinds of jobs being available,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
less in person things
Right.
and more
Mhm.
like the like online corporation kind of thing.
Even with foods, Uber Eats,
Yeah.
DoorDash, like all this. Sorry.
I mean,
No.
it's good to have examples
Right,
Yeah.
it's good. Yeah, like you basically can have anything with a click of a button if you
Uh-huh.
wanted to in the right website.
So I
Yeah.
think that one thing that we really need to do is ensure that even though like a lot of jobs are depleting because of new technology,
Right.
we need to like find other things that people can do,
Mhm.
so we don't like lose the amount of jobs that are available. You all
Yeah.
know what I
Right,
mean?
yes.
We just
Or like use our generation to set up how things like getting a job or getting paid will work in the future, so that when future generations come around, they're not like us and getting shot in the foot.
Right.
You know, because with the development of like online corporations and stuff like that, jobs are becoming less and less. So rather than just being like, oh well, people are screwed, we should probably find ways that people could live, maybe like not without jobs, but you kind of get where what
Yeah, I
I'm trying to
know what
say.
you're saying.
Like how people can still live without having to depend on like finding some major job at like some business or
Right.
something,
100%.
and having some sort of like expected wage.
Right. And I think a lot of that can come from the educational system.
Mhm.
Name, at least from my experience, name one time in high school you really learned about money or learned about taxes.
I learned how to write a check in 7th grade, but that's all.
Yeah, like think about that. I remember learning about the economy and taxes in 7th grade for like 1 week.
Right.
And then it completely went over my head, and then it's like pre-calc, algebra.
And then
Yeah,
all of
those
a
things
sudden
are
we're
great.
thrown into
Yeah,
this.
and it's like, okay, here you're on your own, manage your own money, and it's like, wow, okay. And then it's like, now I am also supposed to save for an apartment or a house, and then it's also how am I gonna help pay for school and such things. It's a very, very interesting situation in the educational system. I think a lot of it can start.
That can be another podcast.
Yes.
We're coming up with so many good things.
Yes.
This is such a good episode.
No,
five new
Five new-
podcast episodes from
one episode.
Stay tuned. Oh.
Because I think it can start a lot sooner because
It should.
yeah, it should, and so many people need to learn how to budget. And like I know, but like personally for me, I struggle with budgeting because I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna buy my groceries. Whatever I have left is somewhat I like this like is gonna go into savings, and then this
Right.
is my spending money. That's the like bare minimum of like what you should know. And then it's also and then you also like, especially if you have a job, paying for taxes.
It's very weird.
It's very
So,
interesting.
Yeah, so then we can in that like whatever discussion or podcast episode
Yeah.
that we have about the educational system, we could talk about like how maybe like future teachers should try to implement
Yeah.
that.
100%.
Yeah, I mean I don't know how that would happen on the grand scale of things
Mhm.
because that's like a whole system.
Yeah.
Right.
But just like for thought, that's a very big thing, like very big issue that
Right.
we're facing now that we're on our own.
Yeah, and it creates such a big generational pressure for us because, you know, it's harder for us to make more money. It's harder for us to maintain stable homes and to, like, economy-wise.
Yeah.
So, like, we could just help a lot more.
So I think it's kind of our generation's job, and you know, past generations, the idea of like the generational gap just getting bigger and bigger,
Right.
as we've kind of talked about before. You know, when they looked at the educational system, they were like, it doesn't need to change, it's fine.
Right.
You know, and then they send us into it, and then we go into the real world and we're like, I don't know how to do my taxes or anything. Like, I don't know if y'all remember this. It may not have been as big of an issue as I'm making it. Do y'all remember when there was a bit of an uproar because like the older generation found out that kids weren't learning how to write in cursive? I think that's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
If anything, I just explained the issue, but
Also,
all right.
we're talking about cursive.
Yeah,
And
sorry
it's
everyone, we
not
cut out
fun.
again.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
there was an uproar about like schools not teaching cursive anymore. Guess what? I don't need to know cursive. I need to know how to do my taxes.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially because like with the development of technology, I can look up how to write cursive if I really needed to.
Right. But I also think that cursive can be a good thing because you have to sign so many things.
Yeah.
And some people's cursive now.
True, but the level of professionalism
Yes.
has completely shifted
Yes.
because it used to be like if you can write in cursive, that indicates that you're like a professional.
Right.
But now, like we have all this like new technology and
Yeah.
like new things that we need to learn that aren't the same as what like
Right.
needed to be learned in the past.
Right.
So that's another example
Yeah.
of a divide.
So, kind of looping back to what I was saying before, it's our generation's job to figure out like, okay, what do we need to teach people in the future?
Right.
What do we need to take out or possibly add on to the educational system so that people are set up to succeed in the
Yes.
future?
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
a wonderful thing.
So even though we are kind of screwed because of our economy and politics and stuff like that, you know, if we're able to teach people in the future, like, hey, this is what went wrong.
Right.
Here's how to not go wrong with it. Here's how to succeed.
Wait, but that also, I'm so sorry, that also ties into the, like, teaching of history.
Right.
Because, I mean, like, history was very much downplayed in, like, in growing up, like, in my school. Like, I didn't really know about, like, systemic oppression really at all.
Right.
So, and now I think more people are pushing for a more honest teaching of history.
Yes, and not selective.
Not sugarcoating
Yeah, not
things.
selective, so it doesn't happen again, right?
Right.
So I think that's also a very good example of how generations have different values.
Right.
Like, instead of just simply being proud of your country,
Right.
we also, like, now are saying we have made these mistakes.
Right.
Mhm.
But that doesn't, like, the
That
patriotism.
doesn't necessarily define us.
That doesn't.
Yeah.
Yes. I
But
was
there's
gonna
still
say.
issues that we need to learn
Yes,
from.
definitely.
Because if you don't learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. That's what
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
A
And so,
100%,
and
yes.
they would, like, they kind of think that they're teaching us, like, correctly, but if we're not learning about, like, the actual occurrences until we, like, step away from it and we're, like, in college, then that could really harm, how that all happens. Y'all look at what I mean.
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know
I get
exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We're dipping into future episodes. past
Wow.
episodes.
Dipping.
Oh! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Crazy. Ray made a pun and he didn't even notice it.
Oh,
That's
I think it's just embedded, or maybe I'm just tired. I don't know. Do we think that's a good place to wrap up? Does anybody possibly have any last minute questions or any do we want to wrap a bow on this or something?
I mean, I think what we all need to remember from this is
Yes.
that we have our differences, but at the end of the day, we just all need to have empathy for each other.
Right.
Mhm.
And we need to try to understand each other. I mean, we don't all have to completely understand why people think the way that they do, but if we respect their decisions and opinions, there would be less of a gap, I think.
Mhm.
Like, there would be more connection and compassion for each other.
Yes.
And especially if differences and the gap is only going to get wider and wider with
Right.
how the world's going to develop, it's very important for us to have that compassion and empathy for each
Right.
other.
Yeah, for sure. So, stay tuned for the future episodes that will result in from this episode.
How many do you have? 5? 6?
Five.
6? Well,
Yeah.
5 new things to think about in the future on the dip.
Yeah.
Woo!
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
joining
for
us.
Thank you
watching.
for watching.
Watch our old episodes if you haven't. Be tuned. Subscribe. Like the video. Subscribe. Turn on that
Subscribe and
notification
like.
bell. So.
Follow us on Instagram.
Follow us on
Yeah.
Instagram, Open Space, Brave Space.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
And we'll see y'all
Yeah.
next episode.
thank you so much for watching.
Yay.
Bye everyone.
Yay!
Yay!
That was